Hey, welcome back everybody to Retail Redux with Corey Zelnick, talking about the retail landscape in New York City and throughout the United States. Today I have the great pleasure of having one of my dear friends and one of the best commercial real estate attorneys in America, Larry Haber, joining me. How are you, Larry?
Thank you very much, Corey. You need to do more deals then, but thank you.
I
appreciate it, though.
We got to do some things. Let me cover the important stuff regarding Larry and some of his background. Now, I could do Larry's entire bio, but we don't have enough time. So I will tell you that Larry has been the managing partner of commercial real estate over at Abrams, Garfinkel, Margolis, and Bergson for over 30 years. Yeah, Larry is a accountant by degree only, not practicing.
Non-practicing
CPA, all right, very formal, out of SUNY Buffalo in upstate New York, and has his law degree from St. John's University in 1985, and I believe Chris Mullen was there at that time.
Yes, the 4 years that I was there.
Nice.
It was unbelievable as the Big East was starting up.
Wasn't that the best?
Yeah,
that was the best of the Big East.
It was incredible.
Absolutely. Larry has done so many things in this real estate field. He has been and is an owner of property. He has developed property. He has redone and restructured leases and loans, and we can go on for days, but he covers the gamut. Some of the more important things that I think that Larry does on a regular basis and why we want to speak to him is that he is a wonderful human being to the community, right? You educate, you help people gratis, but importantly as well, you give them continuing education credit. So there's things to be learned. And I know from experience that if somebody needs a little help, they can ring you up and they get an answer real fast. And
yes, I appreciate that.
You're very welcome.
It's all good.
It's all good. And then
you got to Spike Lee it every now and then.
Another
Knick fan, you got to do the right thing.
We're going to get into the Knick thing? Oh boy. But more importantly about Larry as a person. Larry is the co-founder of Ascent Youth Alliance to Battle Autism. It's a charity he's been working with for about 25 plus years at this point, I believe.
Yeah, not quite, but around,
okay.
My fourth son has autism, and let's just say it's snowballed when he got diagnosed.
Great, and you do great things with the organization, and most importantly, Larry lives on Long Island with his wife and one of his sons, and the 3 other sons have left the nest and are doing exciting things in this world. I happen to know one of them through a mutual friend. Accidentally, we found out. But Larry has done wonderful things, and he's a great human being, and most importantly, he is a friend. And so we're going to talk about retail and real estate, and my cheat sheet is over. We talked prior to the show about what we're going to talk about, and we said we'd be relaxed about it and talk about things that are topical to today's market, especially retail. And the title of our show, Retail Redux, and all the different things that are going on in the world. What is prevalent today, specifically here in New York, although it's around the country, but daily, is cannabis. We're seeing it. We see the 2, I believe a third one is opening shortly, legal cannabis retail operations. And then we see what is by street count about 1,500 that may be illegal, if in fact they are doing things that are illegal. They are rumored to be. You represent landlords, you represent tenants. Put your landlord lawyer hat on. How do we deal with some of the illegal or so-called or alleged illegal operators?
Yeah, not to totally punt on the answer, but first of all, you need to have a good LT attorney, a landlord-tenant litigation attorney, who he or she who lives in the courts, who knows how to work around. But at the end of the day, the lease only goes so far. No matter how you cut it, listen, Adams and whoever else is in government needs to truly enforce it and get it, make it that, there's actions and there's words. They need to, really work with the landlords. They need to work with the courts to enforce it, because some of the judges, and this is not a political statement, need to enforce what the leases state. Our lease, for not even thinking about this, you always have use clauses in there, and very restrictive if you can when you're on the landlord side. You want to be very narrow and not broad, and we can talk about that later. but you always have restrictions as to what can and can't be done. And part of it is, no vape shops, no smoke shops, and then, no drugs, no paraphernalia. And your lease hopefully will say right of injunction at the bare minimum. And then also will say even right of termination. It's whether the judges are going to enforce that.
So you need the judge really to take action upon you as landlord.
Yes.
Right? Because you as landlord write the lease in a fashion that you described, all the protective measures, no illegal, most typically we often see no pornography. It's always the thing that jumps out as to what you cannot do. And then there are the other things. And then you cover it with all the things that you mentioned. But if you're a landlord, and we're out of COVID now, but we had so many landlords, and nobody was very sympathetic towards the landlords. But we had a lot of landlords who couldn't collect any rent.
Oh,
and so
of course,
they're
still hurting, they're still catching up. And listen, I represent more tenants these days, I would say 60-40, give or take, it depends upon how the pendulum is swinging. So, and there are some who think I'm pro-tenant,
right.
Although I just only manage about 4 million square feet of property, I'm neither. It's just the lease is still the lease. It's a very, let's just call it one-sided document. It's pro-landlord. But notwithstanding that, sometimes the courts don't enforce them in the way they should for the landlords. And the landlords, in so many words, are sucking wind. Listen, right now, retail, there are those who say retail is back. I'm not.
I will say that.
Okay. Also, I can tell you I am doing, which is somewhat unusual for me, significantly more retail leases than office leases right now.
No, that's not a surprise at all.
Yeah, there's still a lot of office going on, just because it's the nature of the beast. People still need space. It's just shorter terms and smaller spaces, etc., which is a whole other animal to talk about. But the reality is, bringing it back to cannabis, it's like, right now, it's the landlords walk this fine line. It's like they do like the revenue,
right?
That's coming in, and. Listen, from the standpoint of someone, if you're going to these places, buyer beware. You don't know what you get. It's the same thing. So you hear of, not to be a buzzkill, you hear of all these people who are passing away. They think they're doing something that, we'll call it coke, just for example.
Right.
Okay. And it's laced with fentanyl, and then all of a sudden you have people passing away, and so it's like you have to be careful buying from these establishments.
No, I agree, but. Swinging it back to the real estate aspect of things.
I see it.
I look at it a little bit to back in the day in one of those cycles that we had way back when you'd see the proliferation of electronic stores that showed up. Remember, on Fifth Avenue there were electronic stores. On 42nd Street it was electronic stores, and then there was a period of time where certain types of delis got into properties. And why was that? These were tenants that could never get into these spaces. But market conditions put the landlords in a certain position, and they acquiesced, and they took these things on. And so I think that's a lot about what we're seeing. I mean, you know this. You can walk up and down certain streets and certain avenues here in the city and see 2, 3, or 4 of them on a block. Separate landlords, each one hiring, signing up the other guy.
Oh, there's no question about it. People smoking right outside. I got a little contact bus walking over here from 40th and Broadway. I
set him up especially. I wanted to prep you for the show. But I think, how do you see it going forward from the legal cannabis perspective, and do they survive? Do they survive as operators?
You know what? It depends upon the product they're selling, which is important. One of the sons we talked about before was a commercial office broker for a few years. He moved out to Denver 5 years ago, and he ended up working for a producer of cannabis. That's our mutual friend, and there, one of their mottos is quality over quantity. Okay, and the reality is, so are they going to survive? It's like, listen, if you have Gucci, if you have Cartier, you have that type of brand, you are going to survive. The price points have to be affordable, like anything. You don't want to just cater to the high-end market, so to speak. But when you sit there as to survival, it's what's your product? Okay. At the end of the day, people are going to buy because it's no matter how you cut it, the product is good. It's a matter of how good does it have to be, and can you even tell the difference? But the issue is, it's like running a business. It's very difficult because right now, if you are a tenant or a tenant broker who's entering the cannabis arena and you're going to open up a legal retail, there are no less than 20 things you need to know, okay, about what it's about how to run it. You know, just from, you know, the very basics, it's still illegal at the federal level. You know, do you have an ATM inside? Will you have an ATM inside your place? Because you need to be able to, you know, people are used to cards.
Right.
Okay. You know, using a credit card. Okay. How do you pay your landlord? Okay. It's like, what expenses are deductible because it's illegal at a federal level.
The accounting hat jumping in there.
You have to have language. You know, the language you would have if you're opening up a bar for a liquor license contingency. You need that type of language on steroids, okay, to the nines, because the bottom line is we're not even in the first inning right now as far as they're still making up the laws for New York and other local jurisdictions as we go. And New York is a little slow, okay, at this juncture as far as making those things up, because right now you have to be able to, like, as a landlord, if the laws change, which they will, you need to have flexibility. If you're a tenant, flexibility is what it's all about. You need to be the rubber band, man. Right. You need to adapt to whatever the world changes.
But I apologize for cutting you off, but when the laws change, not an if, but when they do, is there some grandfather aspect to the existing lease that protects the landlord and or the tenant?
No, you have to have language in there to that effect. And both the landlord and the tenant need to have that type of language that's in there. You know, because right now, you know, you're sitting there, like right now, it's like I say, there can't be percentage rent, okay, in leases, because as a landlord, you're not allowed to participate in a illegal activity, because of the federal law. But what if you want to? What if there's how that we just had COVID and you want to give a concession, you want to become a partner in essence with your tenant?
So state legal, federal not.
Yeah. Okay.
So
and then you just get into the whole thing. Is consumption going to be allowed? One of those licenses, and New York is working on consumption.
Right.
But then you start getting into, you know, what happens as far as odors are concerned. What type of filtration systems are going to be in place? Think about deep frying on steroids as far as venting, you know, etc. Pressurized rooms, so it's only in a certain area.
And that brings up, you know, there was a period of time where we had a small proliferation of cigar bars and how they were set up. I will tell you from experience with respect to odors, you know, we represent Panda Express. So I send in an LOI on behalf of Panda Express, and it says, "Dear landlord, we're going to smell. Let's start the discussion."
Yes.
Because we spend an oftentimes inordinate amount of time discussing what happens when there's an odor issue.
Yes, because odors that are incidental to Panda, to a steakhouse, etc., is not a violation of the odor clause. We'll do our best. Okay, we'll have filtration systems.
Right, but if someone's smoking and it's incidental to my business, I'm doing the best I can.
Oh, there's no question about it. There's a lot to know. You know, I did a video in 2018 on 20 things you need to know about cannabis and commercial real estate.
Right.
Although the laws have changed quite a bit since that time, not a hell of a lot has.
Right.
You know, it's probably 25 now, and probably about 10 of those initial 20 are a little bit looser.
Got it.
But, you know, so if anyone wants the link, just go on to Leasing Reality. Shameless plug.
Just look up Larry. Just look up Larry. He'll tell you anything about anything. But I'm going to switch gears a little bit, and I didn't talk about this with you pre-show, and it's not a curveball. But what I've noticed lately in some of the leases that we're involved with is Con Ed, the fire department, and things like that have become really a predominant, prevailing, I'm not sure what the exact word is, issue, because New York City, typically, landlords don't do contingent deals based on these things. You lock in to a transaction, you go build a store, and then you wait. You wait for Con Ed or the fire department or somebody to sign off, but your clock is ticking. And so, of late, this has become a big issue in my LOI phase. And I know because you've told me, and I know because I've experienced it, you are the LOI king. And so, have you seen this in any of your transactions? I'm trying to make this more conversational.
I'm seeing it more and more that tenants are trying to get the landlords to be their partners. They're concerned about DOB you know, as far as the delay theoretically in getting permits and in closing out permits to do the work, that making the landlord the partner, trying to get the free rent to run from the time they get their permits.
Well, I will tell you, I'm going to cut you off there a little bit, because typically in the city, meaning 5 boroughs, not very often, if ever, do you get that. Do you get that? It's a very suburban provision, right? So what we're confronting, and I just had this, is that you get your permits and you go build your store, right? And we take care of that. But I built my store. I did everything I'm supposed to do. And now I'm waiting for Con Ed to show up. And so what we've done, I just did this on a transaction. If I go build my store, I'm ready to open, and I just need Con Ed to flip the switch, or I need the fire department to sign off on my Ansel system, whatever the case may be. And they're not showing up because they're not showing up until they decide to, the clock stops. It just stops.
Listen, the bottom line is it never hurts to ask. You know, listen, I just learned something from you, because the reality is we just went through a period of 2-3 years where, you know, everyone was sharing the pain, so to speak.
Right.
You know, listen, landlords had a bad rap, tenants had a bad rap.
Right.
The bottom line is, you know, no one was right, nobody was wrong. And so from the standpoint of asking for it and saying, hey, listen, if it's going to take me more than 30 days, for example, from the completion of X, okay, meaning your work, okay, okay, and when you're ready to go, you're ready to party and open up that store, and it's going to take me more than 30 days, the landlord will share in my pain as long as I file.
Right. Exactly.
Okay. And you show the proof, because I always ask of that. It's like, hey, if you want a liquor license contingency, trying to make an analogy, you have to file within 10 business days of lease execution.
Right.
So the same thing here. Then you sit there and say, listen, landlord, I need you to share in the pain.
Right.
Okay, it can't be all one-sided.
Exactly.
You know, how many landlords are going to do that? Listen, the landlords who are hungry, the landlords who realize that it's a partnership.
Right, and it's the power of the tenancy too. It's a power of the tenancy.
Exactly. It's whether you have the juice. Where's the location? Are they taking a spot in an alley? Or are they doing it across the street on Madison Avenue?
Right. And look, we have creditworthiness and things like that, and so you gotta play nice in the sandbox.
Oh, of course. Listen, whenever we talk about what's going on in the world and what you can get away with in a lease and what you can't get away with a lease, it's context.
Sure.
Okay. If you came at somebody with an 18-page term sheet, you know, for a 4,000 square foot space, $30 a square foot, it's going to go one place in the garbage.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
You know, if it's obviously much larger deal, then it's a different animal.
Right.
Okay. Then we could at least talk. Forgetting about the broker needs to get out a little bit more. You know.
I know. Yeah. on the landlord
attorney.
Right, on the landlord side, because I do landlord and tenant. I just received a 14-page LOI for 1,200 square feet, and we try to do a measure. Is that a page every 100 feet? I mean, what's going on here?
Yeah.
I mean, it just.
You think an attorney was involved and was getting paid by the word, but
right.
you know, but sometimes the context is there. I did a lease, a triple net lease, a building expired 250,000 square feet, and I was getting 20-page term sheets. Yeah. You know, and from the big 3, 4, however you define them. And the bottom line is, if it's 50, 100,000 square feet, 150 square feet, you can sit there and say, okay, it's justified. I'll play because I want you in my building. Right.
And the devil's certainly in the details.
Yeah,
you got to do it.
There's no question about it. But circling back to the cannabis, there is a lot to know. Like, listen, not because there hasn't been that many. I have not yet even been asked to do a lease on the landlord or tenant side. A lot of the landlords can't do it because does their bank allow them to do it? If they don't have a mortgage, it's way easier. If they have a transactional loan through a hard money lender, then maybe they can get away with it. If they're getting a loan through a mortgage REIT, because they have the flexibility, they can get it. But a lot of landlords can't even take on this tenant.
And to credit to, there's a couple of, one of the big firms here in the city that represents the state in terms of their pursuit of the legal. To their credit, they do the right thing because they know better. They send out the note. Hey, we identified this property. Can you, will you? Yes. And the can you relates to the mortgage and things like that. So there's a fair amount of people that are doing it the right way. It is a process. And look, dealing with the state is dealing with the state. So it's...
Oh, there's no question. But I can tell you, if you are a broker, okay, it's like who's representing the tenant, you are even working harder for your money.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. You're like Donna Summer,
Yeah, right.
She works hard for the money, because that's what you have to do. Because it's like there's going to be a slew of contingencies. Because that's what I want. If I'm on the landlord side, I need to have my control, so to speak,
Right.
on the tenant side. I want a boatload of contingencies. There's
Sure.
no question about it.
Sure. You're not saying we're underpaid as brokers, are you? That was
Listen, I you know what? I think brokers deserve every penny they get, as long as they do one thing, as long as they are goal line to goal line.
That's it.
The worst thing that could ever happen is have the landlord or tenant say, where's Corey? Is he on the beach chair hanging out waiting for the check to come? You need to be the glue. You basically need to be Mahatma Gandhi and the Beatles all rolled into one. It's no time for fussing and fighting, my friends. We can work it out. You need to be able, to back channel, but you need to know what the lease states.
Right. That's what we do. Not to talk about the brokerage community at large, but I think there's a small handful, and I'm going to say of us, not to pat myself on the back, that really do that, and it's important. It's really what makes things work, and it allows you, both from the landlord and the tenant side, to be considered, if I can quote my friend Bob Knackle, a trusted advisor. Because you're there, you're in the trenches the whole way, and people appreciate it in the end. You may not feel it along the way, and there are very few attaboys, but you got to do it.
Yeah, you need to be a consigliere, you need to be a psychiatrist, you need to hold the hand, there's a lot of ups and downs during the transaction. But listen, I look at the commercial lease, I can say this as a landlord, that it's one of the more one-sided documents in the free world.
Oh, yeah.
But 90% of it is business points. It's just dressed up as a legal document. Right. And what are we? We're business people.
Yeah, but don't you guys like words, man?
Okay.
You like words.
Well, I've taken great pains. I use, in New York at least, I use the Redney form, and my rider's about 30 pages. Oh, those 30 pages. Right. Okay, they're killer. But
single space, legal size.
I've done that trick. Thank you. 10 font, yes. Okay, yeah, you found me out. But the short is, it's when I train brokers, it's like you need to be able to know, at least the top 10 clauses in the lease. Right. Whether it's the assignment clause, whether it's the use clause, rule options, good guy guarantees. You need to know that assignment and subletting, depending on the lease, could be anywhere from 5 to 8, 9 pages of help. Right. Okay, right. And so what does this mean in simple English? And that's how you advise, because you have to be thinking, when we talked about the LOI, how am I going to, if I am a retail tenant, how am I going to monetize my investment? How am I going to deal with as the world changes? If I want to go open up a taco shop in Tahiti and retire, how am I going to be able to sell it? What does it say about the 4-letter word called recapture? That nasty little word.
No, exactly. I mean, there has to be the proper exit strategy. Yeah. And whether it's going to Tahiti or the business isn't working out.
Yeah. Oh, there's no question. You want to at least get back your unamortized cost of your build out.
That's it.
And what happens is, and that's why I'm crazy with the LOI. If you are a landlord, you want it to be narrow, brief, and to the point. Get them into the lease negotiation stage. Okay, right. Just because the tenant theoretically, not dealing done, but has less leverage. If you're on, the tenant side, I want the art of what you do is to keep it very brief, meaning the LOI, but have it, so much detail. Have not just for assignment. You don't want it to just be landlord shall not unreasonably withhold condition of their consent subject to terms and conditions in the lease. You need to talk about no recapture, when there's no profit sharing, etc. In just a few words.
Right, and that that from a legal perspective and negotiating perspective, I get all that, and that makes me just think about why I appreciate and enjoy this business so much in terms of its general evolution and also just overall changing, right? Because when we started back in the day, the quote-unquote LOI was just called an offer, and it was one sheet of paper, and the landlord basically kicked the tenant's ass. But over time, the tenant world in retail has strengthened. They've gotten smarter. They've understood their value to the landlord, and so they put out an LOI that's extensive, because they're not going to take the one sheet of paper and get in the room and spend all the money and let a landlord think he's got them, partially pregnant, and so now I'm going to beat them up. And I have a Panda document. Okay, look, they're a 2,500 store chain. They're a $5 billion company, privately held, corporate signature every lease. So they've done a few of these. So their introductory LOI is about 14 pages. Now, me as a broker, an advisor, a consultant, whatever you want to call me, I give a heads up to the other side. I explain what you're getting. Don't get scared by the thickness of the document. Let's talk about it. And I think that's important to know too.
There's no, it's setting the playing field,
Right.
which is what the LOI does as well. But the bottom line is, it is important.
Absolutely.
So listen, what business are we all in? If you had to, what's the main thing that you bring to the table? One of the top 3 things, if not the top thing, is a little word called value. Albert Einstein said, the 21st century version of it, try not to be a man or woman of success, rather be a man or woman of value. And that's what it's all about.
No, absolutely.
Absolutely. And it's, and then, with what we do, believe it or not, quote, Snoop Dogg of all people, Snoop said, it doesn't matter if you're flipping hamburgers at McDonald's, be the best hamburger flipper in the world there is. No matter what you do, master your craft.
Absolutely.
So that's what you're doing when you're sitting there as a great broker, or if you're an attorney who's ghosting behind the scenes, that's what you need to be doing.
Right. So as a great attorney, let's talk about the good guy clause, okay? It comes up, there's plenty of national brands that sign leases corporately, so they're not involved in this for the most part. They come up from time to time. But on a day-to-day, whether it's the cannabis operator, or it's the mom and pop boutique, or it's the restaurant, the good guy guarantee, okay? I think we both are well-versed from the landlord side. How do you protect the tenant? And how do you advise a tenant?
It starts with the LOI.
Okay,
with just a few sentences, inside the LOI, because partially, just the good guy guarantee, as brief as possible. This is the landlord talking to the owner of the corporate tenant. Listen, we're signing a 10-year lease. I'm giving you free rent. I may give you some TI. I'm paying a brokerage commission. I'm not going to be happy if you blow out on me, in year 3 or 4 of a 10-year lease.
Right.
But I need to know one thing: that you're going to be a good guy. While the entity you own and control is in the space, pay me rent.
Right.
Okay. And if you're not going to pay me rent, get your butt out.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And we can go on our way. This way, at a personal level, you're no longer on the hook. That is the basic good guy guarantee.
Right.
And if you are a owner of a corporate tenant, a small corporate tenant, you don't want to sign that, it's sending a flag to the landlord. The problem is, because of no nicer way of putting it, SOBs like me for the last 30 years have injected legal and business steroids into these good guy guarantees. And mine has such things as, this is to protect, it's so that it on the tenant side, I have a lockout for 2 to 3 years, okay, that you can't exercise your good guy guarantee. It's 180 days as opposed to 30 or 60, 90 days as far as notice is concerned. Mm-hmm. I have a construction completion guarantee. And this is all in a very few sentences.
Right.
You start work, you finish it. You start work, you pay for it. Mm-hmm. Okay, you close out permits.
Right.
Okay, and you know how I'm laying out, the brokerage commission, the free rent concessions, etc. I have in there, and some landlords, because I'm not involved in the few properties that I own these days at a legal level. But so it depends on which landlord I'm representing, whether there's a sunset provision. I ask for the unamortized cost at the bare minimum of brokerage commission and free rent concessions, sometimes TI, and sometimes landlord work. As a tenant attorney, you need to know if you're doing a lease with a semi-sophisticated landlord and a law firm, that is hell. So you need to make it as best as possible so your attorney, your tenant attorney, isn't perceived, I should say, as being a deal breaker, trying to change the business terms of the deal, because that's what's coming at me.
Sure.
From me. Okay, you need to, in the LOI, sit there and say, hey, listen, it's going to be a guarantee of rent only. You try for that.
Right.
Okay, you say that, hey, that you can unilaterally terminate after 30, 60, or 90 days. Don't agree to, tenant shall sign landlord standard good guy guarantee, because you know what's waiting. Okay, and then have the exit strategy. The exit strategy is, if you're going to be assigning the lease, that as long as I give you a replacement guarantor, that I, as the guarantor, will be let out. And it's, the language is very, is subtle there, but it's like you need to do that. And it's whether it's going to be, you try not to do it based upon net worth if you don't have to. My sentence essentially is in so many words that as long as there's a replacement guarantor, this is in the LOI, and has a credit score of at least 720 or 750, that's good. Or if the entity, the assignee, has a net worth of, based on the size of the deal, $1 million, $2 million, $3 million, and $500 in liquidity. Because in that case, like if you have a nail salon, who's assigning to Lululemon, for example. No one at Lululemon signing a replacement good guy guarantee,
Right.
but you want the guarantee to go away. But but that's part of. There's a lot there to know. You want it to be as basic as possible.
Right. The reality is, the good guy guarantee really should be what it is. It should be for good guys doing the right thing.
Yes.
Right? The landlord does 12 pages of a good guy guarantee with all of these things, but that's what he's pouring into this, and he wants some protection for his investment.
Mine is only 2 pages, but all those 2 pages. But I am trying to cover, when I'm wearing the landlord hat, there's short-term risk.
Right.
That's what it's all about.
Agreed.
Okay, and it's and I don't want in so many words, if I am allowing a tenant to exercise the good guy guarantee, I don't want to buy headaches.
Right.
Close out the permits. There's no liens on it. The basics.
Right.
And it's from the standpoint, if you're doing a deal with a tenant who's putting in $500,000 into their space, reality is they're not giving back the space in the first 2 years anyway.
Right.
Okay, so they're giving me ice in winter if they get a 2-year sunset provision on reimbursement on amortized costs. It's just like playing the game. It's optics. It's like you want the gold, play the game a little bit, but it's they're complicated.
They're complicated, and a lot of provisions are in the leases, but this is one a lot of everyone focuses on it because at the backbone of the good guy guarantee from the tenant's perspective is that it's backstopped by personal.
Yeah, well, here's the one thing that people don't get. It's a release of the guarantor. Right. It's not a release of the named tenant.
Correct.
So if the named tenant is the operating entity that has the gold, so to speak, I call it the mothership, okay, then it's not as if you can use the guarantee as exercising the good guy guarantee to go across the street and get another 6 months of free rent and $100 build out or whatever.
Right.
Okay, it's what do you put on? If I'm given a choice of a tenant of putting on the mothership and 3 months of security versus a non-operating entity and putting up 6-7 months of security, there's not even an issue.
Right.
Non-operating entity,
Absolutely.
6-7 months of security. This way you know your risk. Yeah, oversimplifying, but that's what that's very important.
Agreed. Well, that is our Larry Haber lesson or 3 of the day, and I think that we could do this on a regular basis if we chose to do it. And you can educate me, and we can educate others in these various conversations. But I think at this point, we should cut it. We should talk about Jalen Brunson as probably the all-time free agent pickup for the Knicks.
Did you read that article in the Post, or you just read it?
Oh, there was an article in the Post?
What?
There was an article in the Post?
It was. But by the way, I think you're right.
Yeah, I mean, when you look at it statistically, probably the all-time high. And by the way, I was dead wrong. I thought we were crazy. I shouldn't say we. I thought the Knicks were crazy to spend that kind of money. Although 20 years of season tickets, I can say we.
Yes, you definitely can. You definitely can. There's no question about it. Listen, the bottom line is actually in New York sports is actually hope. We're not yet Boston or Philadelphia or some of the other towns that are doing well, but there's hope.
There's hope, and that's all we need. Because I've always said, and throughout this long stretch of holding tickets and going to the Garden, when we were having some of the worst years, I try to explain to an out-of-towner or somebody who doesn't come that often, there is no place to be than Madison Square Garden when the Knicks go on a 12-0 run in the third quarter of a meaningless game in February. It's the most exciting venue in America. And that's why I love it, and I love basketball, and that's why I continue to go back. And it looks like playoffs this year, maybe not the championship, but playoffs this year.
Why not?
Right? And then
why not?
Exactly.
I think it definitely happened.
Yeah, no, we're in the playoffs. Just a matter of what we.
So let me flip it back to what we were talking about.
Please, go ahead.
Like right now, like if you had to give advice to a tenant that you're representing in the marketplace, what are you saying to them when they're out there looking for space? Like what is the most important thing that they're looking for? Or a few things that they.
Well, there's always 101, right? Location. So we identify a location. They come to us. We discuss a market or markets where they want to penetrate. I've used Panda Express as an example and some things. I've used Lenwich. I haven't today, but Lenwich as an example. Like we charted Lenwiches. I use Lenwich specifically. So, you know, we just opened up at 792 Lexington Avenue. We bought the building, he redid it, great, exciting. What's next? And what he saw with respect to the market, someone who has 19 stores in the market, over 30 years in business, is that Midtown has died, okay? Now I say we're back. Most people say we're back. Castle Systems, I don't know who's counting, 60, 70% occupancy, whatever you want. That's less the issue than the fact that we have become a society of 4-day work weeks. Fact, in some cases, 3.5, okay?
Yes.
And so for a guy whose core business was Midtown, got to flip the switch. So we had opened up a couple of residential positions prior to COVID, had nothing to do with COVID. And then when COVID happened and work from home happened, he saw the numbers flip over. And so now, strategically, to your question, we identified the markets he's not in, where the people are at home, not in Midtown, at home. And so we're strategically looking in those areas, because that's what the demographics tell us. That's what the sales figures
Oh, there's
tell
no question. You know, it's adapt or die.
and so he adapts, and so we go after it, and so strategically that's what we're looking for. We're looking for the proper size, and going all the way back to what we talked about earlier. My first question to a landlord or to a landlord representative when I'm identifying or looking at a particular location is, let's talk about your utilities. Because if we can't get past the utility conversation, let's stay friends, but there's no further conversation. I gotta have a certain amount of amperage, I gotta have a certain amount of gas in order to run a business. And oftentimes brokers are too quick to knee-jerk and just say, oh, don't worry, we'll get it. I'm telling you, okay, we'll get it, ain't gonna work anymore because the system doesn't work that way.
And there's no question about it. Like, I'm not to give you another line, but Ben Franklin, who I love quoting in one of his lines, is diligence is the mother of good luck. And that's what you need to be. You know, from the standpoint of, like, you know, you need to be part of the visual. You need to be, as a broker, you need to be a financial proctologist. As far as the landlord, what type of building am I going into?
That's right. And what most businesses, what are the two of the most important things? Time and money. And so when someone says, oh, don't worry, I'll get it, I say, I don't see that on my clock, or I don't see that on my calendar. What does I'll get it mean? And that creates problems. And we can go on and on and on, but we're out there, we're identifying markets for our clients, and we find the locations, and we dig, and we work, and we get in bed with them, and we get in bed with our landlords, and we work our asses off, and we pay attention, we stay focused, and we move forward. And that's how we do it, as they say.
That's how we do it. I like it.
All right, Larry, thank you so much for spending some time with me.
Thank you for having me. Appreciate the opportunity.
Yeah, man, I look forward to doing it again real soon.
Absolutely,
thanks,
my friend.
All right.